Hello friends, Adam here with FED. Today I'm joined by a special guest to discuss one of his favorite topics. I'm joined by a man who goes by many names. Some call him Pavise, some call him Pavise, some call him Pavise or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to say your name. But he's here. So would you like to introduce yourself so we can know how to say your name?
Alright, hello everybody. My name is Pavise. The short form of Pavise Productions. That was my original channel name, but I make Fire Emblem videos on YouTube talking about all sorts of things, mechanics, ads, weird facts and trivia. I kind of talk about anything and everything, but I'm primarily a game designer, so the mechanical conversation, the mechanical talk is kind of where the heart of my channel is, and I haven't uploaded very much over the past few years, but I definitely enjoy Fire Emblem. I enjoy talking about it, and it's one of my favorite game series.
What you do upload is like primo, though. It's really good stuff, really well edited, really well thought out. That's the thing. People come to my channel for like a daily dose of like trash, you know? It's honestly like not very well thought out or scripted, or I just kind of talk to people. But your stuff is like top notch. It's really good. So go check out his channel. The link's in the description and everything. And at the end of the video, of course, please go check out his channel if you haven't. So like I said, Pavise, sorry. I mean, I've always said it Pavise. That's the problem, man.
You can say it however you want. I am not the authority on pronunciation. So,
all right,
I let people say it. I bestow upon you the right.
Oh, okay.
To
I can
say it however
I
you
okay.
like.
All right, well, Pavise, you said you had something you want to talk about today, something that you really are passionate about and care about. So why don't you introduce our topic?
So this is going to be a pretty design-heavy kind of talk, mainly because that's what I really like about Fire Emblem, or the kind of this angle. But I really want to spend, I don't know how long we're going to be going for, but have a nice hearty discussion about permanent death, or Permadeath, as it is known as in short. I think the direction that the series is going right now is almost antithetical to Permadeath on a fundamental level, and I kind of just want to talk out about a few things regarding Permadeath. Primarily, what role does it play now, what role has it played in the past, and what role will it potentially play in the future. I think just by the way I've framed the question, you guys would know where I'm coming from on this one, or where I think it's going.
Yeah.
But
so
I think it's something to talk about. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's do that. Let's start with the past. Like, what was the purpose behind Permadeath in the beginning of Fire Emblem?
Well, if you go to the very origin of the genre name, we call it tactical RPG, but in Japan, they're even still called, the genre isn't called the tactical RPG in Japan, it's called the simulation RPG. And Kaga is often, our Lord and Savior Kaga himself, is often credited as coining that term. That, like, Fire Emblem probably wasn't the first simulation RPG, but it definitely coined the term, or definitely put the genre in the mainstream. And I think in that word, simulation, I think you really get where permanent death is the angle it's coming from here, in terms of it's a part of the war simulation, where if in war, if you die, you die. If you fall in battle, you fall in battle. Like, that's kind of it. And I think it was mainly playing into that simulation role. Whereas now, the series has definitely shifted more in the RPG direction than the simulation direction.
Definitely. You know, I don't want to go off too much of a tangent on not Fire Emblem, I guess, but even the tragedy of war is really like Permadeath really accentuates that aspect of war, that it is not a happy time in a relatively bright and happy series, right? And you can see that even in the work that Kaga did after leaving Intelligent Systems in like Tearing Saga and Berwick Saga. There's some messed up stuff, like a lot, like I don't feel like talking about it, but there's some.
Yeah, I get it. I know.
There's some about. Like not even like there's some.
I mean, even FE4 or 5, just the type of stuff that happens in those games is a little more intense than. Yeah,
he doesn't shy away. Games. Yeah, he didn't shy away from the tragedy that is life, you know. where I don't feel like we see that as much, and I think that's kind of just the shift we're seeing with Permadeath as well in the series.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that Kaga in his design philosophy championed a lot more than I think, who's the main director now? Maeda?
Yeah, Maeda.
Yeah. Kaga's design philosophy definitely is a lot more polarizing, or I'd say a lot more distinct, in that, yeah, mechanics like Permanent Death kind of fit in with his style of, like, he doesn't really care about, not that he doesn't care about the player, but he's definitely more about creating an aesthetic or a play aesthetic that is serving kind of, I don't know. I don't think he's making them hardcore for the sake of making them hardcore. I think he's genuinely trying to simulate something, or generally trying to get to a deeper message with a lot of his games or a lot of his mechanics. And I think with him departing from the series, I think on a massive scale, you just see the design philosophy shifting away from kind of the principles of Permanent Death and Kaga's design philosophy in general, because it is a kind of older, more archaic, to be more blunt, but a little more archaic design philosophy that doesn't fly as easily with modern audiences, and it's a lot harder to sell as a product than I guess the direction the series has gone.
Yeah, so you say so when Kaga left, there was this distinct change in philosophy, but we didn't see casual mode and stuff like that until FE12. So yeah. How, like, what were like the subtle changes that happened along the way to get us to a point where we have Divine Pulse and casual mode and stuff like that?
I think you first see it in stuff like, I can't speak for much of FE6, but the first change from FE5 to 6 is you have the random number generation changing to be double rolled, or you see the introduction of True Hit.
Yeah.
That's introduced in Fire Emblem 5. Fire Emblem, even just in terms of the story, it's definitely a massive kind of, not a massive shift, but definitely a shift away from the kind of grim, dark kind of FE4, FE5 aesthetic. Those are very dark, kind of grisly games. FE5 definitely shifts away from that. Not FE5, FE6. I might have been misspeaking there the whole time. I'm talking about FE6 when I talk about the introduction of double roll and True Hit.
Yeah, it's just a lot lighthearted overall, for sure.
You also see, I'm thinking more of the North American release here, where you have I know there's differences between Lynn's story in America and in Japan. I'm trying to remember what they are, but just Lynn's kind of saga or story in general, the way it introduces mechanics, a lot more hand-holdy than Kaga ever was.
Oh, for sure.
To be fair, that's also more of a general trend of video games in general. Just a little more. I don't even think that's a bad thing necessarily, but it's definitely a shift away. But I think the seminal moment is the introduction of casual mode, and I believe FE
12.
12, yeah. And I think that's also because they didn't fully change the series, I guess. Again, when you talk these things out, you start thinking them out more. And I think you see this series really hit rock bottom, embracing its roots, in a sense. You have Radiant Dawn and Shadow Dragon being some of the worst-selling games in the series. And those are two games that I think, more than any other games, kind of go back to their roots, or try to kind of go back and, like, embrace a lot of the design philosophies of their predecessors.
Oh, so, for sure. Yeah, Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, and Shadow Dragon are, like, quintessential Fire Emblem. For sure. And
100%.
It is sad that it didn't sell as well, so we got different stuff. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's one potential hypothesis. They did a slight shift. They kind of revisited those roots, or tried to embrace those roots, and the result was kind of catastrophe from an existential sense. And to be fair, casual mode didn't even really fix the problem 100%, because FE12 still didn't sell too hot. In fact, I think FE12 I don't know the sales numbers, but it didn't sell too well, if I recall.
Well, it didn't even leave Japan for whatever reason, which is super disappointing. But yeah, so but I think what people the game that people are most going to associate casual mode with is Awakening, right?
Yeah,
100%. And I think that is truly where we like settle into this modern philosophy, this modern design philosophy that we see Fire Emblem in now.
100% Awakening, and it's kind of hard to, again, it depends on the language you use here. I don't want to even use the word blame the devs, but because that makes it sound like modern Fire Emblem is like a blight or something, but it's really not. It's just a different
direction.
It's
great. It's just different. Yeah, it's just different.
But when you look at the sales numbers and you look at the design decisions, if you're a developer or a company in that situation, how can you not embrace what that game did when it was so successful? It's impossible to ignore. And when you embrace kind of those ideas, especially a lot of the ideas at the root of Awakening and a lot of the design philosophy of that game, and you try to extrapolate it into the future, you're going to see a massive shift in the direction that the series moves. And in terms of Permadeath's role, especially because casual mode was being introduced to American audiences for the first time, which I think is also important, because to North American audiences, this was their first time interacting or getting the option to have Permadeath off. And I think you see a huge influx of new players now who are like, oh, I always wanted to play this, but this was the feature always stopping me. Whereas in Japan, the series was maybe slightly more established. Again, that's just conjecture or guesswork. I don't really know. But in terms of North American audiences, I think them being introduced to casual mode is a massive factor as well.
For sure. You see that was in like all the reviews, I feel like, at the time. That was heavily praised. For instance, my nephew, I might be misquoting him. Sorry, Lane, if I am. But he played casual mode in Awakening and loved it.
I played casual mode in Awakening.
See, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's dispel that right now. We're not some sort of elitist who are saying that casual mode is a bad thing. In fact, I would argue it's a good thing. Just saying.
Awakening is my first game, and only reason I probably even got through that game or played it was because it had that option. It took me about 2 or 3 years after playing Awakening on casual that I moved playing any Fire Emblem game with Permadeath. So I come from this conversation as being one of the converts brought in through casual mode.
Yeah, and that's great. Like, awesome. Casual mode's not a bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad at all. I think it's 100% actually. I think it's definitely a positive step. That introduction now has changed like the design philosophy of the games like forever. Like, you would not have Divine Pulse if you didn't have casual mode. Like 100%. That is a progression of that philosophy. I would argue another step further, but I'd argue that I wish they had thought of Divine Pulse before they thought of casual mode, but that's just my personal thing. I wish they had found out that solution first before they found out casual, but casual's a little easier to implement than Divine Pulse from like a technical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like I don't know, does one make the other redundant? Like, do you really need casual mode if you have Divine Pulse, or vice versa? Like,
it depends on your skill level, in my opinion. In my case, it makes it entirely redundant. If I'm playing Fire Emblem with Divine Pulse, I've never run out. I've never run out of uses. So if I was on casual or classic, the play experience is identical. Like, it's functionally identical. I don't get through all my uses. I play kind of, I don't know. I play as if it was casual mode, because I can just make crazy, brash, risky decisions without having to worry about anything. I'm like, oh, I've got Divine Pulses, and I'm not going to make enough mistakes to the point where I'm running out of uses. So,
yeah, and you can even like RNG abuse to an extent with Divine Pulse and stuff too. Like it trivializes the game in some aspects.
In some aspects, 100% for sure. But obviously, I've played Fire Emblem now for 2013, so we're getting on 7 years now. Obviously, I'm going to be using Divine Pulse a lot less than someone who has never played a Fire Emblem game before. I really would love to see whatever analytics Nintendo gathers about Divine Pulse usage, and I'd even love to see their analytics on casual versus classic usage, which I'll never get to see that data, but I really wish I could, because I'd love to actually know those numbers rather than just guesswork from forums or guess like polls, because that's such a certain demographic who are taking those polls. You don't really get that general audience kind of perspective of who's playing what.
Yeah, you're getting the the 10,000 hardcore fans who love Fire Emblem, as opposed to the 3 million people who bought the game and just played it because they thought it looked cool or something, So yeah, that's a bad. I see what you're saying.
I'd want to see that data so bad, but it's like, it's probably not going to happen, but someday, maybe. I don't plan on trying to work for Nintendo or Intelligent Systems, but that's the type of data I would love to see. Because that's the type of data that informs decisions and informs on what they're going to do in the future. It's based on that data. Because if 60% of players are playing on casual mode, all of a sudden, the majority of your player base is playing without a core mechanic. And when it comes down to a design decision of whose needs are going to be serviced, sounds like a weird way of putting it, but that's kind of what it is. If a decision is going to affect the 60% or the 40%, the 60%, most of the case, is going to win that design decision if something's on the chopping block or if something's being debated. That data is indisputable, and especially at a company like Nintendo, and even Intelligent Systems, like, they've got to keep the lights on. They've got to keep in business. They're going to go with what the data says, rather than kind of what the kind of, aesthetic or artistic choice or the permadeath choice. Again, that's a hypothetical. I don't have the data, so that's just eyeballing it based on what I think, but I have actually no clue. It could be the other way around.
Okay, so you say that it's like, well, let's stick with the hypothetical 60-40 split. What is the purpose? Why are there still people, that 40%, still playing classic mode? Why are we still playing with permadeath? What is even the appeal of that if you can play casual?
Here's the thing. How many people nowadays with 3 houses are actually functionally playing with permadeath?
Basically zero.
Almost nobody. The only people you're seeing functionally with permadeath is probably 1 or 2%. That's where I'd ballpark it, because when you have Divine Pulse and the turn wheel, what role is permadeath even playing anymore? It's just like we were saying earlier, at least for people who have played as long as we have theoretically, playing with the turn wheel is functionally playing with casual, and if not exactly identical, it's very similar, the play style or the play aesthetic between those two modes. So why do people play with permadeath still? I'd argue they don't really anymore. You kind of have just probably a few holdouts who never use Divine Pulse. I mean, when I play 3 houses and when I play Echoes, I use Divine Pulse. I use the turn wheel. I just do. I'm one of the proponents of permadeath, so...
It doesn't help that it feels 3 houses. So I am in the middle of trying to Iron Man 3 houses to the end. I'm on like attempt number bazillion. I don't even know anymore. And it is not fun because 3 houses, I don't feel like Divine Pulse was put in place to be partially for this, to help, just to save newer players. But I also feel like it was kind of put there to help save everybody from bullcrap that is in certain chapters. I'm looking at you. What is that? Chapter 4, chapter 3, the stupid Fog of War map. That map's brutal. But yeah, it's. I don't know. Is it even optional? That's the question. I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. Again, this gets into more design philosophy. Does the level design, or if permadeath is theoretically in place, how much does that limit the developers and how much they can try with their level design? Because, for example, just like you mentioned, a lot of level designs, again, this is a theoretical conversation. I'd have to look on a map by map basis or do a in-depth analysis to really prove this point, but if you look at the map design of Three Houses, how much of that map design can they get away with without Divine Pulse being there? Like, without the designer knowing, oh, even though this part of the level is kind of like hard to deal with, I know the player has this as a resource. I know they can use it. Therefore, I am okay with making this design decision that's a little riskier because I know that the player has a backup if this kind of element doesn't play out or plays out in a way that is unfair. Maybe not intended, but plays out in the unfair kind of edge case. That's a very realistic or possible design decision that comes up, and if you have Divine Pulse there or you don't have it there, that affects what comes out the other end.
And I think we definitely see that with chapter 13 in like Verdant in every route except for Crimson Flower. Like chapter 14 in Verdant Wind or in Silver Snow is just like brutally unfair on Maddening. Just like ambush spawns all over the place, like ambush spawn Falcon Knights who can move like across the entire map and just murder you in one turn. Like it's just all sorts of stuff that if you don't on a blind playthrough, it feels like without Divine Pulse I would have reset on that map so many times, type of thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, mm-hmm. I think the fact that Divine Pulse is in the game did inform many design decisions.
And then that just. And here's the thing, as the series goes even further into the future, I hope they revisit how Divine Pulse works, because personally, this is a personal preference, I don't like the gameplay that results of Divine Pulse being relied upon. That's just not my preferred play kind of aesthetic or what I find the most enjoyable. If I have to look at my Fire Emblem experiences and target the games that I felt were the most enjoyable to play, it is probably... Conquest, from a gameplay perspective, is probably one of my favorite Fire Emblem games to play. Specifically, hard classic Conquest is probably my favorite Fire Emblem play experience. And the reason that is because Permadeath is there, and the level design, although, again, Conquest can be hit or miss, but when it really hits, Conquest feels so good to play, feels so satisfying to solve, and because you don't have that safety net of Divine Pulse or the turn wheel, it just gives the play this intensity, this kind of flair, this fire to it that is just, it's non-existent. Like when I play Three Houses, I find myself just slipping into boredom so often because I just don't care enough. And I also don't care enough to self-impose an Iron Man like you do. Like I don't think I could play Three Houses that way. When I sit down and play a video game, I don't have the will to like not reset or not use Divine Pulse when a character dies or something happens to me.
And let's be honest, I'm doing it for the clicks. Let's be honest.
And then that gets into the question of, is it even optional? I fall on the side that it isn't optional. Like, in theory, yes, it's optional. In practice, no, it's really not. It depends on who you are, though. Basically, when the game sets out a scenario for me, like in Conquest, if I say I'm playing Classic and I'm playing Hard, and the game, that's the frame now that the game presents me, I can't change it. I think you can only go down in difficulty, not up. I think that's the thing. I forget what the direction is, but that's the only change I can make to my experience. Otherwise, I have to go outside of the game to get that experience, which is resetting. And resetting introduces its own set of kind of exchanges and trade-offs, and honestly, I can see why people find it unappealing. But if I'm presented, for example, with Three Houses, where there's a button that can save everybody, I'm gonna press that button. I'm sorry, I don't have the will or the gamer points or something to not use that button. I'm gonna use that button. So for me, I don't care enough about the video game to self-impose that challenge. I want the game to present it to me, and maybe that's me being entitled. I don't know. But
okay. People, if anyone in the comments is gonna say something stupid about this, stop, because it you play video games to have fun and enjoy your experience. That's why, and that's what developers and designers are trying to do, is give you an experience that you can sit down, escape from life, and enjoy. And Divine Pulse, as much as it changes Fire Emblem's philosophy, it is like, it 100% respects your time and makes the game more enjoyable. 100%.
It allows people to do that, 100%.
So back off, you elitist. Okay, so I guess I want to talk about one more thing with you before we go. What is... Sorry, my dog is sneezing. What's the happy middle ground? Where do we go to make both sides happy? The people that think permadeath needs to be an essential part of the game, but also to have less hardcore fans and have an enjoyable experience.
Where do we go, or where are we going?
I want to say where do we go to fix that, but what do you think is going to happen?
I think
also,
okay. We'll start with going.
Okay.
The series is obviously going away from permadeath. I think permadeath almost already functionally is non-existent in modern Fire Emblem unless you will it to be, or really try to make it a part of it on your own time or as a result of your own efforts.
Yeah.
And I think in the future we're only going to see that increase. I think the trajectory of the series financially is too hard to ignore, or it makes no sense for Nintendo to ignore and to go back to the permadeath roots. That doesn't make sense, and I don't that's 100% a logical decision, and it introduces more people to Fire Emblem. So I mean, ultimately it can also be a net positive. Where do I want it to go personally?
Yeah, you are in the head chair at Intelligent Systems. What do you tell them to do?
I am Mr. Intelligent Systems himself.
I
am Intelligent Systems himself. I think, oh man, this is such a hard... Here's the thing. Intelligent Systems making all the right decisions for their company. If it were me, though, in charge, just servicing my specific needs and wants as a player...
Exactly, yeah.
I'd probably make... Again, I'd make Divine Pulse an option on the menu that you can turn off and just say, hey, I don't want the button there to do anything. I'd have that as an option to turn off. And if I had unlimited resources and money, I'd also spend more time tweaking the game to adjust to what difficulty or what mode you're playing on. So if you're playing without Divine Pulse, design decisions potentially change in the game based on what difficulty you chose, or the game is designed for permadeath from the start, and then Divine Pulse is introduced after that design process has happened already for permadeath, so that you don't have Divine Pulse kind of messing with, or quote unquote, again, the language here isn't perfect, but it's what I've got right now because it's on the spot, quote unquote, ruining the level design. It's just a quality of life feature added on top rather than something that is taken into account on every level, because I think ultimately with that combination, what you get is you get a game that is both playable and enjoyable with Divine Pulse off, and with Divine Pulse on, you still have that accessibility, you still have that ability to, I don't know, include everybody. You still have that quality of life experience that's there as an option, and it's still 100% enjoyable and 100% still playable and enjoyable. And I think that is ultimately the way to go with this kind of feature, but that's totally not the way it's going to happen. Actually, I might be wrong though. Intelligent Systems internally theoretically might be designing all of their levels with permadeath as the baseline, and then introducing Divine Pulse on top of it. I don't know, I don't work there, so I can't say if that's true or not, but it's still something that I think that's the way I would go theoretically to service me specifically as a player. So
yeah, I think I'm along the same lines of thinking. That's the thing. If they build the game around permadeath, like you're saying, and then add Divine Pulse, that services pretty much everybody.
Yep.
So that'd be cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if so I think inevitably we're gonna get a remake of some game in the series. I'm not gonna say which one it's gonna be, whether it's Genealogy
An older title though,
or Binding Blade. But yeah, they'll definitely throw like Divine Pulse or something like that into those, right? So
yeah, they already did it for Echoes. They'll definitely do it again.
They'll definitely do it again, and I think it was only in Echoes because that game was originally Permadeath inspired. So I don't know. I think that's interesting to think about. But yeah, do you have anything else to say, or do you want to final statements?
I could talk about Permadeath until like forever probably, but I think in terms of just talking about it and that kind of through that lens or the lens we've talked about it so far, I think I've got in everything I want to say. Anything talking about it further would be shifting gears to another aspect of the mechanic, but I think we covered a lot of ground. I think we
had a good discussion today. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It was a blast talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
So if you guys want to hear more from Pavise, go check out the link in the description. Also, there's the little end card thing. That'll just click on that. Go check out his channel. Really good stuff on all sorts of just. Honestly, I'm not to be rude. It's not rude. I think it's cool. It's like some pretty random topics in Fire Emblem that no one else is really talking about. Like he has this really good video on manga or the manga history of Fire Emblem, which I did not expect to enjoy, but it was actually really good. So like there's just all sorts of stuff that he's made that I've really enjoyed. So please check him out. And if you haven't, subscribe to this channel for more content like this and like the video for visibility. Thanks guys. Bye.
All right. See you guys around.